The Chase video on how to make a simple HTML5 interface using Adobe Animate. So I'm going to make my face into an interface by putting buttons on my eyes, nose, and mouth and make these buttons do various things. So I'm opening up Adobe Animate and I'm going to click HTML5 Canvas because that is the format that we'll be using. And so it opens up. And the first thing I'll need to do is to import a picture of my face into the library. So I'm going to open up my import. Here's a picture of my face. It comes up in the library, and now I'm going to drag it onto the stage. It's very large, and so I'm going to use my zoom tool to back up, and then I'm going to take my resize tool, which is just below these selectors, and I'm going to resize this picture to fit my stage better. So once I've done that, I'll magnify a little bit. And then I'm going to label this layer background. And then I'm going to lock it so I don't accidentally select it later. Now I'm going to make a new layer and put my buttons on there. So I will label that button so I know what's going on. And then I'm going to take my oval tool and I'm going to draw buttons on that layer. So I'm going to select my oval tool. I'm going to go to my color picker. Here's the fill in the stroke down here. And I'm going to open up the color picker, and I think I'll pick blue perhaps. But I want to also turn the alpha down, which is the opacity, down really low to like around 10 approximately, so that it's almost transparent. And now I'm going to draw these ovals. I'll do one for each eye, kind of like eyeglasses here. And then my ears, and then my nose, and then my mouth, and that's going to be the buttons for my interface. So now I'm going to take my top selector tool, and I'm going to turn all of these into buttons by selecting them, and hit Modify, Convert to Symbol. Make sure you're in button and not movie clip or graphic. Make sure it's button, and then I will call this ear right. And this one, ear left, and then my eye right, and my eye left, my nose, finally my mouth. So I've got all of my buttons. Okay, great. So the first thing that I want to have happen is I'm going to click on my ear right here, and I'll make some little sound waves be there. That'll just be there for a time and then disappear. So that'll be my first interactive button. So I'll make a new layer for those sound waves that I'm going to draw. But I want those sound waves not to be at frame 1 where they're going to be all the time. I want them at frame 2, so I will stop this timeline at frame 1 and then have it go to frame 2 when I click the button. So in order to make something new happen at frame 2, I need to right-click on the frame in the timeline and insert a keyframe, because keyframe means make something new happen. So I put a keyframe. You see I've lost my background and buttons because they don't have any frames to extend them out further. Nothing exists out here at frame 2. So I'm going to extend the buttons and background out a little bit by just right-clicking in the timeline on those layers and just insert some frames. There's the buttons, insert frame, there's the background. Now when I move this playhead here, it'll keep on going, and eventually I might have to extend them out further depending if I put more stuff in my timeline. All right, so now at frame 2 on my, I'll call this my waves layer. At frame 2, I'll then draw, take my pencil tool right here, and I will draw these sound waves at my ear. And that's what's going to be there for a moment. Now I want them to exist for, let's say, I'll say 30 frames. That's a little over a second in time. So I'll just insert a frame there. And that's as far as they're going to exist. They're only going to exist between frame 2 and frame 30, and then they're going to disappear. Great, now I just have to code the button. So right now, if I was to hit Command and Return, what it would do, it would simply go through the entire timeline where it's going to just loop around playing the sound waves in the loop here. You can actually look at the timeline and see what's going on, where it just plays my sound waves and then it goes to where they are not, and so they disappear for a little bit and then it comes back and plays them again. So that's what Animate will do. It will just keep looping and looping and looping until you tell it to stop. So I want it to stop at the very first frame right here. So I'm going to take this playhead right here, put it at the first frame, and I'm going to go to Code Snippets, Window Code Snippets, and write some code. So I'm just going to use the HTML5 canvas because that's what we're using. That's the only code we're going to look at. And we're just going to look at timeline navigation, and just these four are the only ones we have to worry about. In fact, really, it's just the stop and then go to and play. That's all we're going to do. So the first thing I want to do is just stop right here at this frame, and it writes the stop action right here and gives you a note letting you know what's going on. And so now if I hit Command and Return to see what's happening, it just stops at the first frame as expected. But now I want to code this button to go to frame 2 and start playing. So I click on the button that I want to code. I'm still back here at the first frame again because all the buttons need to be coded at the first frame. So I'm going to click on my ear as a button, and I'm going to say on my snippets, go to frame and play. So I double click on that, it writes a note, and it just defaults to frame 5. It'll always default to frame 5, and you just put whatever number you need in there. So I would think I'd want it to go to frame 2 and play. That would make sense. Except that the timeline doesn't match HTML5 timeline because HTML5 starts at 0 and not 1. So that means every frame that I tell it to go to and play I have to minus 1 because that way I'll be starting at 0 instead of 1. So I don't actually want it to go to frame 2 and play. I want it to actually go to frame 1 and play, which in this timeline becomes the second frame. So I do that. And I'll hit Command and Return, and now when I click my ear, it goes to the wave bit and it plays, and then it loops back around until it hits the stop action once again at the first frame. Okay, that's fine. So now let's say my eye, I'm going to bring in an image, perhaps, of an eye. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click that. I will bring a new layer for that image. So I'll click the new layer button right here. I'll call it my eye layer, or I1 perhaps, since I've got two of them. And I want that eye to appear later on. I want it to appear after my drawing of the waves. So I will use the next available frame over here, and I'll put a keyframe. And that's where, close this for a moment, I'll bring in a picture of an eye. I'm going to import to the library a picture of an eye. Right here, there's a picture of the eye. And I'll make it like a third eye right here, and I'll probably have to shrink it. So now when I click my eye, I'm all of a sudden going to have this third eye appear like that. And I want it to persist there for a little bit, and then I will have it go away. So I think I'll have it persist only until frame 60. So everything else I'm going to wipe out. I'm going to shift select all these frames I don't want and remove them. Remove frames. So now it's only going to exist between 30 and 60 right here. So now I have to tell it to go to this frame and play from frame 30. And it's actually frame 31, it looks like. I'm looking at my number down here. So go to frame 31 and play, and then come back around until I hit the stop action. So I'm going to click the button that's going to do this. That's this eye right here. And I want to code all my buttons again on the first frame. So I'll go back to the first frame and click this. And here's my snippets. I want it to go to frame and play. And do I want it to go to frame? Let's see, where do I want it to go? I don't want it to go to frame 31. I want it to go one back. I want it to go to frame 30. Remember, everything has to be -1. So I'm going to put 30 in there. And I'll hit Command and Return to test it. So here's my ear again. And then look, it goes to the eye even though, yeah, my eye button works, but it keeps going to the eye whether I like it or not. And the reason why this is happening is because of the way Animate works, where it likes to loop. It clicks on the stop action, but as soon as I say go to somewhere new, it's just going to go down the line here and go to the end of my timeline and then come back around until it hits the stop action. So what I have to do is I have to tell it to not go to the eye part. So I have to tell it, as soon as I hit the end of my first button's function, run immediately back to the first frame over there and stay there. So the way we're going to do this is we're just going to copy some of the code that it generated here and paste it over here at frame 30 and tell it to go back. And so all we're doing is the code that it wrote was make a button, and when you click it, do this function of go to and play. But we don't want to click anything. We just want it to go there on its own. So we just want to copy this dot go to and play with a frame number, and that's all we need. So I'm going to copy just that. And now I'm going to right click here at frame 30, add a keyframe, and then paste that command. I don't want it to go to 30, I want it to go to frame 0, which is my very first frame. Remember, it's 1 minus 1, which is 0. So now you'll see it's created an action here, and when it gets to that action, it's just going to go back now to the very first frame. I'll test it out, and everything should be working properly. Here's my ear going back to the first frame. Here's my eye. And then it loops back to the first frame on its own, only because that's the only animation I've got right now. Now, as soon as I put something new here, I'm going to have to, once again, force it back to the beginning when it's done being there. So I can do this now by simply copying and pasting this frame that has that command of go back to the beginning. So I'm going to select that frame, that go back to the beginning frame. I'll right click and say copy frames, and then I'll just paste it here at the end of my eye thing. So I'll paste frames. There it is. And every time I want it to go back, I'm just going to keep pasting that frame at various points on my timeline to force it back to the beginning again. That way it won't play all of my actions all the way to the end of the timeline before looping back. Okay, so let's do something else. Let's create something for this other eye, for example. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I will make a new layer, and I'll put some text right there. So I'll call this my text layer, and I'll close this action window here. And now I'm going to make some text. I'll make it black text. And I will turn the alpha back up to all the way up, and then take my text tool right here, and I will write something. Where do I want it to be alive? I want it to be alive somewhere after the first two things I made in the timeline. So in that case, here's the next frame. It's frame 61. I'll insert a keyframe, and this is where I'm going to put some text. So maybe my text is going to be I can see you. All right, so that text is only going to live between frame 60 and about 80, so that's fine. So once again, I'm going to code that button. So I will click I'll go back to the beginning again, because remember, everything has to be at the beginning. I want it to go to and play now. It looks like it's 61 in the numbers here, frame 61, which means I got to go -1. So I need it to go to 60. So back to the beginning. I will click the second I button, go to frame and play, and I want it to go to 60. Great. And now I just have to bring my loop back frame at the end. So remember, these are the loop back frames that we're going to copy and paste. So I'll pick one of these, doesn't matter which. So I will copy the frame and paste it at the end right there, so it loops back. I'll test it out. All right, there's the ear button, here's the I button, and here's the other I button. So I've got all these buttons working. Click, click, and click. Okay. So now I'm going to make an animation happen. And I'll maybe make that animation happen at this ear button right here, since I've already used the two eyes in this ear here. So in order to make an animation, it needs to have its own timeline. So I'm going to create a new symbol, make something happen in that symbol, and then I'll drag that symbol in, and that will be the animation. So rather than saying modify or convert to symbol, we're going to go to insert new symbol. So new symbol means here's a blank symbol to start out with. So I'm going to call this my ear animation, and I'm going to make it not a button but a little movie clip. And it gives me a new, let's get rid of this code snippets for now. Gives me a new canvas and a new timeline. It's not the main timeline, it's something we're going to drag in just a moment. So I'm going to create, I think I'll do something a little more interesting here. I'm going to create a ball, and I'm going to make it move from left to right. So we're in a symbol, and in order to make this ball move, I also have to convert it into a symbol and then make it go somewhere. So I'm really going to have a symbol inside of a symbol. So I'm going to select it, modify, convert to symbol. Let's call it ball. And I will right-click on the first frame of the timeline. Now remember, we're inside the symbols timeline, not the main timeline. And I'm going to create a motion tween. There it is. It puts me out 1 second in time. And so my playhead is out there 1 second in time. I'm going to move this thing, and so now it's going to make this animation happen, where it moves back and forth. So I'm now going to navigate back to my scene. Here's your navigator for your scene. Anytime you make symbols, they will appear in the symbol navigator right here. Back to scene 1. So let's make a new layer for that symbol. I'll drag it in just a moment. I'll call it ear, let's call it ear 2, I guess. Ear at. And I want that to start, I'll start it over here at a new frame where there's nothing going on. I'll insert a keyframe. I need to extend these out again because I ran out of frames. I'll extend those out. All right, so I want it to start here. So here's my ear animation. I can even play it. I can test it out. I've selected it. I can even hit the little play button here, and there I'm testing it out. See that it works. And now I can drag that onto the main stage, that little animation I made. It's a little big. So I'm going to shrink the whole thing, and it's going to shrink everything. It's going to shrink the entire animation that I just made, which is the ball that goes from left to right. So I do that. That looks good. It's going to start there. It goes for a second, if you remember. So we're at frame 81. I need to go to 106 or thereabouts. Maybe I'll go one less just to make sure I hit it. That's where I want it to stop. So I'll insert it. It could be a frame or a keyframe, doesn't matter which. And so it's only going to live for that long. We won't see it animate until we test it. And so now I need to go back to the very first frame. I want it to start here. It's frame 80, and we have to say -1, so I'm going to have it start at not 81 becomes 80. So go back to the beginning, click on this ear, go to my code snippets, HTML5, timeline navigation, go to frame and play, and I'll say go to frame 80, which is really going to be 81. And again, I've got to send it back to the beginning when it's through. So I will do the copy paste of this code, this action on this frame. So I'll copy this frame again and paste it at the end right here. So it knows to go back to the beginning again when it's done. Let's test it out. Went a little past my ear, but there it is working. And here's the other ones working as well. If I don't want it to go past my ear, which it's doing, I could just simply start it off stage. So I'll go back to the beginning here where it starts, and I'll start it off stage, and I'll test it out again. This time it shouldn't go past my ear. There we go. That looks a little better. Okay, great. So I've got all those buttons made. Now for my nose, I'm going to bring in a video. So I'm going to click New Layer, and I'll call it Video. And I want this video, again, to start at some area where there's nothing going on except for the interface. So I will put a keyframe here down the road. And it looks like I'm at frame 106, which, as we know, is really 105. And in order to do a video, I'll close these windows for a moment. The way you bring in a video, you can't actually import one through the import, because you'll see import video is grayed out. So the way we do it is we go to this window called Components. Open up Components, put it here, and you'll see there is a folder with video in it. You can open up that folder, and there's the video component. And so I'm going to double click that, and it puts it on the stage. You can size it, I suppose, if you want. I'm just going to put it right there. And now I got to just tell it, okay, what video do I want to play in there? So in order to do that, you go to the next one after components, which is component parameters, and that's where you get to tell it what it's going to be. So here's the parameters, and the source is my video. So I'm going to click on the source. I'm going to go browse for it. Here's a movie. So that's my source. I'm going to hit OK. And now I can tell it, well, do I want it to autoplay? Sure. Do I want controls like play and stop? No, I just want the video. Muted? Sure. Loop, that's okay. Preload, yeah, that's a good idea. All right, all that looks good. Okay, let's try it out. See if this video is going to work. Some browsers, the video doesn't work very well. Will it work in this browser? So it looks like I'm having trouble with Firefox. I'm going to try it in Safari. So in order to try it in Safari, I'm going to publish it. I have to do some publish settings and tell it where I want to publish it. In other words, to do it for real, not just put it in a temporary folder. And then I can drag the file over a different browser than Firefox and make that video work. So I'm going to go to Publish Settings, and I'll call this whole thing, well, I'll leave it untitled 1 for now, that's fine. And I got to tell it where it's going to be put. I'm just going to put it in my face to interface folder, that's fine. And I will then click Publish. Okay. And so now, get this out of the way. You'll see as soon as you hit publish, it makes some files. It makes this untitled1.html. That's that untitled one. It makes a JavaScript, and then it makes a folder with images, it makes one with videos, it makes one with components. So it generates all that for you. So I'm going to take my untitled1 HTML, because it's a web page, and now I'm going to drag it over Safari and see if the video plays in Safari. So I did it on my nose. I'm not getting it to play in Safari. Let's try it again on Firefox. I'm getting on either one. There's the video. Oh, I didn't make the button happen yet. That's the problem. I never coded the button. So it is the nose that's going to, I need to go to and play frame 105. That's what I didn't do. So I'm going to click the nose, back here at frame 1, go to my snippets again, timeline of HTML5, click to go to frame and play, and I want it to be 105. And then I want to go back to the beginning again. We'll do a copy paste again when it's through. And paste frames. Now, I'm just going to test it and see if this will work in Firefox. It works in Firefox. Good, we're good. So there's the video playing when I click the nose. You'll see that though some browsers, things work better than others. Some browsers will shut you out of certain functions because of security reasons. Okay, great. So now I've got that video going. And now I want to make the very last one is going to be, my mouth is going to activate a sound. Now I have discovered that there is some browser problems with sound, and this is because I guess certain websites would start a sound playing really loud, whether you liked it or not, as soon as you hit the web page. So some browsers have made a kind of a rule inside that you can't have sound just start on its own. And so I get around this rule by making my sound embedded in the video and then making the video not visible. So that's how I'm kind of getting around it. So again, let's make a new layer. I'll call this my sound layer. I want it to appear, make this a little bigger here. I want it to appear somewhere where there's nothing going on. So I'm going to add a keyframe out here in the middle of nowhere. And I have to extend my interface now. Once again, a little further. Pull these out. Okay, so here's no man's land over here. And I'm going to do this same thing. I'm going to do that whole video. I'm just going to bring in the video, but this time I won't mute the sound, and then I'm going to make the video disappear. So here's my components. Remember, we got the components by hitting Window Components right here. I'm going to I'll drag in the video, put it right there. And once again, I will, with the components parameters, load in a video that has sound on it. And let's see, this is my sound movie. I've already made a video with sound on it. So that's what it's going to play. Hit OK. And this time, autoplay is good, controls no, muted no, loop is okay, everything's fine. Okay, good, that's great. Now the only thing that I'm going to need to do now is shrink this video. And in fact, I'm going to shrink it until it's not even visible anymore. It'll be 1 pixel, so it'll be gone, and we'll just hear it. And that's how I'm getting away from the sound problem, by making a video you can't see but just has sound in it. So I'm going to put a frame here at Just insert a frame here at around 165 I'm at, and that's how long it's going to exist. And I got to code the button, like I forgot to do last time. So back to frame 1, let's code the button. I want it to go out to frame, where is it? 142, which means minus 1, it has to go to 141. So go back to the beginning. Code snippets. Code snippets. Timeline. Go to frame and play. Okay. Oh, I have to click the mouse. Mouth. Go to frame and play. 141. Okay, done with that. Should do that. Close that up. And then I need to force it back to the beginning when it's done. So here's my loop back action. Copy the frame and paste it at the end. So it will go back to the beginning. Let's see if this works. Command enter. Click my mouth. I see that it's coming up. There it goes. A little bit of music. You can even see that my little 1 pixel video right there. There's my nose with a video, ear, other ear, text with the eye, image. So now you've got this entire interface that causes different things to happen. So that's about it. At this point, since you're done, the only thing you need to do is publish your work, and so it makes it permanent, puts it in that folder that you've told it in your publish settings. So you hit publish, it publishes it, and that's it, you're done. So that's all you need to do to make an interface with HTML5.